Hi, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and this is the Backlog. This week I got back to Mega Man, this time with the first ZX game. This series takes place after the Zero ones, and is again done by Inti Creates, so there's a lot of similarities here. The gameplay is kinda the same. You run around, fighting baddies, making your way to the boss to complete a mission. The big hook this time though is that you can change forms to gain the abilities of past characters. You start out with the X Biometal, a piece of equipment containing the personality of X and also able to impart his form and powers unto its user. Soon though, you switch from using his impressive firepower to his adaptability, combining him with other biometals to gain new powers. The main one is the titular ZX, granting you access to a sword and a gun. HX gives you two short swords and more aerial maneuverability, like Harpuya. FX has two cannons that can hit hard and have mappable firing trajectories, and it's based off Fafnir. LX can travel freely through water, like Leviathan, and has an edge staff for attacking. PX is fast and has a lot of projectiles, like Phantom. There's also a human form you can use to crawl through tight spaces and talk to townfolk without freaking them out. All the forms are neat, and I remember back in the day getting a lot of use out of all of them. Though this time I spent almost the entire game in the Zero-based ZX. I don't know if I just had more of a youthful curiosity and willingness to experiment when I was younger, if I was able to use my excess free time to learn them better, or if the Zero games have just conditioned me to try and beat these things using just the sword and gun. Either way, most forms besides ZX felt very situational, me only pulling them out when I needed them and then immediately swapping back. This could also be fairly annoying, needing to stop to bring up a transformation wheel, scroll to what I needed, use it for a few seconds to clear something, then switch back. Even worse was when I needed to use the human form. There were several times where there was a simple power-up sitting on the other side of a crawl space. There were also some NPCs that I needed to talk to that would only respond to my basic form. This was another example of needing to swap for just a few seconds, then change back. Since this had even less utility than the other forms, the situations felt even more tacked on and even more annoying when I needed to do it. Despite my complaints though, I do like this system, other than the basic human form, and really wish I would have taken more time to learn the ins and outs of it. As for how progression in the game is marked, you have missions. At some points of the story, you'll have only one to take on, and at others, up to 4. Completing many of them will grant you another biometal to use. These tasks are not set up like a typical level select though. Rather than having locations that you just pop into to perform a task, instead each area is interconnected with the exception of your main base, and you need to make your way to whatever part of the world the mission takes place in. While you can tell which section connects to which, you cannot tell exactly how they do, and you'll have to run around, say, C2 until you find the exact doorway that takes you to E1. Not only that, but until you enter a section for the first time, it won't appear on your map, so if you know you need to go to Area J, you just kinda have to wander around until you come upon it. There are these terminals called trans servers scattered throughout. All of them will let you take on missions or save, and the yellows will allow for fast travel. This helps you get around somewhat, but doesn't really solve the main problem of the map and different areas being laid out pretty helter-skelter. At the start of the game, I would choose whatever mission I wanted, running around and trying to find the area I was supposed to go to, find a place where I could do another mission, explore a bit, give up, and go back to a trans server to change what task I was going after to one where I knew where I needed to be, and then run back. After a while, I just stopped taking missions until I found a place where I knew I could do one, then ran back to the nearest station to select it. There is really just so much pointless running around in this game. Having it laid out somewhere between a Mega Man game with you choosing the order you go through things and a Metroidvania with you being able to reach new areas as you unlock new abilities was a super neat idea, but it just didn't come together here. It's a pity too, because it really wouldn't take too much to salvage it. A better laid out map would have done wonders, but more than that, if you could just take on a mission upon entering the appropriate area rather than needing to choose one in advance and hope you wander in the right direction, it would have made things less of a chore and more of a joy to explore. Map aside though, the game seems to be significantly easier than those in the Zero series. Well, either that or I've gotten so good at the genre after playing through those previous games that I was able to blaze through most of the levels with very little trouble. Sure, there were a few stages that were harder than the rest, like the lava one, not to be confused with the fire one, Because as any One Piece fan will tell you, lava is hotter than fire. Really though, the only one that gave me any significant trouble I'd say was the final stage with the boss rush. Part of this was just how it was structured. Rather than having 8 bosses to choose from, they only set you up with 2 at a time, and then there's more level in between each set. More troublesome than that though is that you get no health refills after a successful bout, and many of the in-between sections aren't generous with them either. Beyond that though, these bosses seem more RNG based than previous ones. Some of their attacks you can dodge while half asleep, some have incredibly tight windows to avoid, and some leave the bosses invulnerable, so whether you can maneuver around it or not, it's not doing you any favors. This can lead to a difference between a good or bad run to come down to what combination of moves they throw at you in a round, and while I did get to the point where I could take them consistently, there were still times where I felt like I took some unfair damage. Then again, maybe if I had actually learned how to use my forms besides ZX better, things might not have seemed so unbalanced. The regular bosses also had weak spots, but hitting them too much would also damage the biometal, making them have less weapon energy when you'd retrieve them after the fight. You could repair them with money though. The idea is neat, but the hitbox for these spots can be pretty inconsistent. Still though, I think pretty much anyone who can handle the Zero series shouldn't have too much trouble with this title. Oh, and the music. It frickin' rules. Mega Man games have always had good music, and the Zero series had quite a few solid tracks themselves, but there's just something about this soundtrack that really gets me. It sets the mood super well, from the pleasant town music, the upbeat and jaunty main bass theme, the wondrous starting area, and the different level tracks that range from beautiful to mysterious to high energy to tense to just really rockin'. And if you go beyond that and manage to dredge up the special arranged tracks that they put together as a separate OST, and it's truly a treat for the ears. Seriously, even if you don't typically like these sorts of games and have no interest in ever playing ZX, look up ZX Tunes on YouTube and put it on the next time you read or exercise or something for background music, and I think you'll be amazed. It's a crime none of these made it into Smash Brothers. As for the visuals, it's very similar to the Zero games, but rounder? Just look on screen and you might get an idea of what I mean, though if you go a bit deeper and look up the game's anime cutscenes or concept art, it becomes more apparent. And I really do mean rounder. The Zero designs are sharper and more detailed and, dare I say, edgier, both literally and metaphorically. Everything here though seems simpler and, in many instances, brighter. It reminds me much more of a Sentai-style kids anime, with many of the enemies looking more like baddies of the week than intimidating villains. The standout designs that seem to have gotten more attention are the recurring characters, such as the player character, of course, Prairie, who is super cute, Pandora and Prometheus, who look pretty damn cool, and the final boss. The setting does have heart though. And that kinda segues us into the story. The game takes place 100 or 200 years after the Zero series, and it seems that the dream of peaceful coexistence between humans and Reploids has been largely realized, with physical enhancements being given to the former and limitations to the latter, making the two almost indistinguishable. There's still some Mavericks causing trouble, but the company Slither Inc., headed by the CEO Serpent, take care of the basic needs such as security, and you can totally trust them with names like that. You play either as Vent, a young man, or Ale, a young woman, working for Jiro, a father figure who runs a delivery service. When transporting goods for a group known as the Guardians, you're attacked by Mavericks and separated from your mentor. You soon discover that the package was a sentient object known as Biometal X, containing the consciousness of the legendary hero, and when your clients are attacked by a large mechanaloid, he offers to fuse with you to grant you his power. After that, you volunteered to continue partnering with X and the Guardians to protect the people of the land, uncover a conspiracy, and take down bad guys. To reiterate my previous point, it really all feels like a Saturday morning Sentai anime, with the more colorful and simpler designs, you transforming to take on the bad guys, and using the power of friendship and justice to get by. The bad guys are also ridiculously evil, wanting to take over the world to remake it in their image, powering their machines using fear, and sacrificing people to achieve their ends. Even the overall message seems to be not forgetting tragic events, accepting the bad with the good because that's what makes us who we are, which isn't a bad message, but isn't quite as heavy as what the previous series brought us. Overall, the game just seems to be targeting a younger demographic, which is fine. I actually have a soft spot for sillier storylines like this, where they name the secretly a bad guy group super nefarious sounding things like Slither and Serpent that make the twist very obvious. I think it just kinda bothers me in this case since it ties in so closely with the Zero series, with several returning characters, many direct references, and heck, them letting you essentially play as not just X and Zero, but the fan favorite 4 Guardians as well. It just feels a bit disappointing going from the super heavy and tough as nails Zero entries to what feels like a much watered down ZX. If the order were reversed, I'd find it much more palatable, but given how the plot connection between the two are laid out, of course that'd be impossible. Still, that might explain why I loved this so much when I was a kid, Zero being too hard for me but this being just right, so I was able to experience the two series in reverse order. Overall, I do think this is a terrific game. They experimented some with the format, and while some ways didn't quite click, others were pretty amazing. I am honestly kind of disappointed in myself for not playing around with the different forms more on this run. At some point, I wanted to start doing runs and practicing a bunch of challenging platformers, foremost among them those on the Zero ZX collection, and extra time with this title is especially tantalizing. If you like Mega Man or platformers in general, this game is a big recommendation from me, especially if you find the Zero games too soul-crushingly hard. I also watched Danganronpa 3, both the Future and Despair arcs. This was an odd one, being the third and final entry in the mainline Danganronpa series and going from visual novel games to 2 anime series. The intended viewing process is to watch 1 episode of Future and then 1 episode of Despair, and boy howdy, let me tell you what a pain that was, at least with physical media. I was constantly swapping between Blu-rays, hitting the menu button and choosing the right episode. More than that though was the fact that the episodes did not end consistently. Sometimes the closing would play and that'd be it. Other times there'd be a short little scene. Yet others would go on for several minutes, making it a little tricky to tell when I was supposed to swap discs. I just kinda had to keep track of where it ended in case I ejected at the wrong time. Either way, while one title is a sequel, the other is a prequel, yet they managed to weave the two together in such a way that alternating between the two is really important. The Future arc takes place after Danganronpa 2, as you'd expect, dealing with the fallout, though it quickly turns into another killing game. Once again, the cast is trapped in an enclosed space. This time, however, each has a bracelet that counts down, and once it reaches 0, everyone is put asleep. An attacker then wakes up, is given just enough time to kill, and the rest of the group is then roused. In between timeouts, the group can try to kill anyone they find suspicious, and if they can get through 1 knockout period without a death, the game is over. Each character also has 1 forbidden action that they're told, and if they perform it, it will lead to their immediate death through lethal injection via their bracelet. I think it's a good twist on the format the series has seen so far, being different enough to be fresh, but similar enough that it still feels like Danganronpa. Not only that, but the mystery is laid out super well, giving you enough hints to guess at some things, tricking you with red herrings at other times, and dropping plenty of surprises along the way. It's a delicate balance for a genre like this, not wanting to be too predictable that you can guess the whole plot half an episode in, but not so obtuse and out of left field that it feels unfair and like it's pointless to try and figure out what's going on. I personally guessed the twist pretty early on and felt pretty clever about it, convinced that I had split the whole thing wide open. When I was proven correct soon after though, I knew there was no way I'd seen the whole picture and placed my hand back in my chin as I began musing anew. I felt super engaged the whole 12 episodes. The Spare arc, on the other hand, took place before both previous entries, concentrating largely on the cast of 2. This was kinda the opposite to the Future arc, much of the plot being predictable since familiarity with Danganronpa 1 and 2 causes you to know largely where most things will end up. Still though, this leads to a different kind of tension because even though you're able to guess at much of what is going to happen to the cast, you find yourself hoping that maybe things won't turn out the way that you know they really need to. And then you really cross your fingers when it comes to the stuff that the details are fuzzy on, hoping that it'll turn out not quite as horrible as you expect they will. It's a trip, and I would drop a content warning because of how disturbing it can get, but given that no one's likely to watch this without getting through the previous entries in the series first, it seems a bit unnecessary at this point. Overall, I did enjoy watching both, even if it did leave me feeling quite melancholy. The writing was good, and I felt it wrapped up the main story quite well. I did kind of feel like the Spare arc was missing some details, but given that they were limited to 12 episodes and some of the stuff I wanted expounded upon were covered in other entries, I do understand. There are a few bits in both that I thought were a little contradictory, but another viewing might clear some of this up if there was some stuff I missed. I really love Danganronpa, and I'm thankful I got to experience the series. It's kind of a hard thing to recommend though, with it being the sort of thing that I really feel like if you get into, you need to get really into it, given all the material there. At the very least, I'd say someone who might be interested would at least need to play 1 and 2 and watch 3, with everything else not being required but highly recommended as it fills in a lot of details. I myself watched the anime adaptation and the Let's Play of 1, played 2, as well as Ultra Despair Girls, read through one roughly translated Japanese light novel and another side story, then watched the anime for 3 with plans to do my own playthrough of 1, play post-game for that and 2, read an additional light novel, and finally get around to the game B3, which I'm told doesn't tie into the main line, but I still need to play after everything else for some reason. So yeah, if you're looking for a meaty story with quirky characters to sink your teeth into, told largely through visual novels, Danganronpa is a strong recommendation, especially if the prospect of additional, optional media to further fill out the lore sounds appealing. If that sounds like too much of an investment, too niche, or if you're overly sensitive to disturbing imagery, I cannot blame you for passing. That's another week down. I finished the bulk of Danganronpa, with what I have left being largely for my own satisfaction, and by next week I should finally be done with the Mega Man Zero ZX collection I've been working on, so I feel pretty good about this one. The Cuphead cartoon also came out on Netflix this week, so that was a treat. I'm looking forward to what the next episode will bring, but for now, thanks for watching, maybe subscribe if you enjoy this sort of thing, and perhaps I'll see you in the next one.